Sound Words, brand new summer episode. Great to be here in the station with two guests today, Mara Hagen, Leni Charbonneau. Thank you both for being here today. How's it going?
Oh, it's great.
Pretty good.
All
Could use
right.
some more coffee, but
Right. Always. Excited to be in the booth. This is 91.7 KIBH FM Seward and on YouTube at our @Sacktown channel. So that's where you can listen and watch, get the sound. We haven't had a show in a while, so summer we're trying to keep up, and here we go. Got a great show with two guests today, so excited to hear that. There's going to be some really good lit poems, words flying around, so that's going to be fun. I met Leni and Mara the same way, really, through the Seward Farmers Market. Leni is the market manager, and she had the idea to do an open mic at every farmers market, and it's been really fun. And Leni and Mara have both been sharing work, often new work, so the open mic has been a great way to get something ready and put it out there and get a response and really just add to the market, which is such a wonderful place anyway, with the good food and good people around. Just always gives me a charge. So the open mic has been a great thing. We're always looking for performers. There are a lot of farmers markets left. Every Saturday in August from 10 to 2 p.m. there will be a farmers market right by the Ranting Raven. And the open mic, we've been starting around 11 and just go until there's no one else to perform. And we're getting more performers every week. I think it's catching on. It's been really fun. So with that and the train horn, I will pass it to our guests today. Leni and Mara have some work that they brought today. And I do want to say that I met with both these writers for coffee as well. We've been doing the Writers Coffee Hour kind of every other week or so. And I've heard, some good samples of their work. And they're awesome writers here. And they've written a lot of awesome stuff. And I think they're going to write a lot of great stuff in the future. So here's a little, looking at what they're working on and their style and what they're bringing. So thanks for being here, you guys.
Cool.
Take it away. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Sean. And yeah, I'm super glad and grateful to be here, especially with these two. Like Sean said, my name's Leni. I'm wearing a couple different hats in Seward this summer, but one I'm pretty proud to wear and I'm very grateful to wear is a market manager for the farmers market. I've been telling people around town, I feel like I'm cheating a bit with sort of my social scene with that job because I got to come in and just coordinate a really fantastic group of people that are bringing good food and craft to the community. And then in our tent, Sean is stationed right next to us where we're selling our veggies. And we just started having a conversation. He was selling his book and it's like, I'm also interested in writing. I have a writing background. It's been my quote pseudo-professional life. And really just excited to meet other writers all the time. And it sort of just came up that we could keep a writers group going this summer. And that and the farmers market have been real highlights of my Seward summer. And get to meet awesome people like these guys, spend time, have meaningful conversations. It's been great. Super excited about it. And yeah, like Sean said, we've been having an open mic every farmers market, I believe, since our second one. And we're going to keep that going, always open. But that's sort of happening in tandem with this writers group that Sean mentioned. And every week at the writers group, we decided it'd be nice to have a theme for our open mic, not out of any sense of obligation that people have to respond to this theme or even share works in line with that theme, but more just, if you're interested in writing or you've been writing in the past and maybe are experiencing a bit of a lull, to have sort of a point of inspiration and a point of conversation with other writers, just if you need it. And a few weeks ago, just given the general discourse and hype, we decided it'd be good to address this idea of artificial intelligence. So we made that our theme for one of the markets, and that came out of a few very passionate conversations with writers and others about what does this mean, sort of in line with what's going on in the general discourse. I wrote a small thing for that open mic, which I will share on this show today. Just really quick, my sort of other writing background has been more long-form pieces. I'm sort of venturing more into fiction myself, but I've been mostly in nonfiction up till now. And I will say the open mic has been such a good outlet as a writer to kind of stick to short mediums and things that are easily shared with community members. It's such a low stress environment. So it's been great for my writing practice. And I encourage anyone who's thinking about trying out writing or getting back into it to really take on this platform, because it's been super helpful for me and really fun. I'll share a little poem I wrote with that artificial intelligence theme we had a few weeks ago. This poem is called Artifice, and this actually I was sitting in the Seward library, and there's a bunch of photos on the wall of a bunch of different folk craft from the general Chugach region. And there was one in particular of a woven hat that really caught my attention and made me think about the recombination of media, materials, and images, and sort of how that relates to this notion of artificial intelligence, which is also the recombination of media, materials, and images. This is titled Artifice. I look at a photo of a draping hat, pointed upwards like a spruce. It's labeled Chugach. Its function is named after the land. Its ornament is named after the land. Spruce roots, dentalium shells, ermine skins, glass trade beads, pigment, cotton cloth, and leather. This is its composition. I see spruce roots woven together to create geometries unknown to spruce roots. I see dentalium shells dangling next to ermine skins, their habitats recomposed. I see glass trade beads next to them, the voltage of a lightning strike, cooled and condensed like the extensive geographies that separate and pull together Pacific people. I see cotton cloth and leather folded onto one another, animal and vegetable, to make one cohesive mutant skin. I look at a photo of a draping hat. Input words, sign, symbol, Chugach tradition. It is a function of the land. It is an ornament of the land. So that's that.
Nice.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Thanks, guys. Yeah. I feel like my first thing that I wrote down off of that was like the geometries that I instantly got, and how I feel like you turned like that very naturalistic moment into like almost something that I was seeing in fractals. Or maybe if you could read like the second stanza or third again.
Yeah, with the geometries.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see spruce roots woven together to create geometries unknown to spruce roots.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I feel like it's us imparting our like human tendencies on something that is something like, natural.
Yeah, for sure.
In order to kind of comprehend it.
Yeah, I guess what this sort of comes from, comes from many ways. But again, our theme was artificial intelligence and sitting with the sort of general hype that this has triggered in public discourse. What this means for the arts and the sort of like doomsday narrative of it all. I'm a little wary of, not because I don't also share the fears that it will do to the arts and so on, but if at its core these AI machines are doing the performance of recombining images with inputs, I just wanted to bring forth the provocation that it is a very human thing, part of our culture, to recombine images in a given environment. And there's degrees of difference there, of course, and my sort of what I've been sitting with as someone trying to make sense of it is, instead of just rejecting a new technology, is trying to ask the question, what are the degrees of difference between recombining images, and then how do we make decisions like, oh, is this harmful or beneficial? Kind of trying to sit with that idea that we do always recombine, and we've been recombining media and nature, and then just sort of trying to approach it from that angle. That's been sort of my provocation, I suppose.
For like the silver lining in it all.
Possibly. I mean, I still might, arrive at the same doomsday narrative. Although I've heard some really excellent investigative journalism from some folks that sort of unearthed, I guess, the fact that these sort of technocrats in California, that's been sort of their marketing scheme for a lot of these AI platforms, is to say that, oh, they're too smart for us, or they're too advanced for us. Be careful. There's been some like intentional marketing along that line. I heard a really great comparison to like weight loss supplements. That was like, apparently on infomercials there was this phenomenon where they say these are really powerful supplements. You could lose up to 20 pounds a month, but only take them so you lose 5 pounds a month. And that was sort of the marketing strategy. And I've heard a parallel to how AI has been put out in the world quite intentionally, that part of its way of getting out is through this sort of dystopian narrative that's been, according to some, quite intentional. So who knows? I think it's always good to approach these things critically, and I just like sitting in the space of thinking about, is this really new, and then what are the degrees of difference, and then what should we be worried about, and what could we, I don't know, sort of see relation with as human practices that we've been doing. Still undetermined, but yeah.
Definitely. I think it's interesting. Like, I was doing some reading on it last night, with the bureaucracy behind it, like the Elon Musk, and I forget the name of the exact guy, but he's like the big tech startup of it in like the 2015 or something like that. And they're talking about how they bought out the AI because they want to be able to control it. But at the same time, I wonder how, if you're starting something like that, then they're making monetary gains off of it. It's like they're controlling it in order to capitalize.
Right.
In a way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So they're trying to come off with this spin, like, oh no, we're gonna do it in a way in which we preserve like humanity, in a way that where it can be safe, but at the same time, that's kind of not true.
Because that'll help it make more money. It's not to make better art, or like have an artist have a more full experience. Amara, I know you have a nice response to this, or parallel, which is coming up right in a sec. But I just wanted to bring like that recombination is a term that I hadn't said or heard yet. I really like that for a way to look at AI, right? You're recombining things that have already been done. And for you to make this parallel to this, native hat, that's made out of all these natural materials, like it's a combination of stuff, was a really cool way to approach it. And I think with AI, like when I've written about it, like I'm trying to be careful not to critique it too much. And I thought yours had a nice balance, which writing, it's always good to have a balance where you're kind of both sides. Like it didn't sound critical of AI to me, or even about AI for a while. At the end, you have the words input and function, which start to sound like machine. But, for most of it, you're just breaking down like all the materials that are in this really cool piece of art. Yet it is about AI. You did get there. But, it's not overly critical. I would say.
And I mean, I guess full disclosure, I do have my own set of criticalities. I guess the thing I'm trying to bring to the table is the thing that in a lot of the discourse that we're supposedly worried about. I don't know if it's all that new. I found like there's a lot of, especially in contemporary art, there is a lot of tendencies that are quite similar to AI. People put in, a list of inputs and then make art. We see that with like corporate art all the time. And I think that area should be subject to the same type of conversations we're having around AI. And I don't have conclusions to bring right now, but to the extent of is that art or not? And of course, I think there are degrees of difference with the types of recombinant design we see with AI when you do come from a limited pool of inputs, like what we have in the sort of digital ecology. Versus, I think there's huge degrees of difference between like natural ecologies where you still have inputs that you're recombining in ways, but you're also leaving room for emergence and process, which I think is a huge difference. The AI machines don't leave room for process. It's the inputs give you one output, and then that's what
it's pretty quick.
That's what's claimed as art instead of a process of like, okay, we put two things together, it might stimulate something and then lead to a completely different path.
Right.
Whereas I think I'm more inclined to say that's an artistic process.
That you worked on for a while, maybe even with your hands, like
exactly. And there's not certainty at the end of it.
I think it puts into question too, like I've been thinking about this a lot recently, like what actually is art, if you can have all these inputs and you can generate all of this art that's already been created, what is the process of the human brain making art?
For sure.
If it can be computed like this and then recreated in such a sterile way.
Well, I see some art right here.
Okay.
Let's hear about your process more.
Okay, so I guess to start off, I just want to thank you guys so much for including me in your space.
For sure.
I think this kind of ties in a lot with the writers group. I've been thinking a lot about the parallels and how we all kind of have these different lines and how they all happen to cross in their own little intersections. And I think it's really interesting that AI's brought up here as I'm also working on something AI-minded back home, or was. And I wrote an article, kind of basically an investigative piece on the death of the English major in Rhode Island collegiate environment. And the way that I wrote it, I found was interesting was I had to kind of start with a fictional narrative in order to get down to the hard journalism of it. It just helped my mind kind of work with things and kind of figure out the avenue in which I wanted to adventure this on.
Cool.
Yeah. So this is the intro to the piece. And it is kind of doomsday-esque and very dystopian. So I apologize.
That's all right.
So the sky darkened over the tall pillars of the university. Storm clouds rolled over the fresh green leaves of spring maple trees. A quiet hum of electricity filled the spaces between abandoned buildings. Wind whistled, pieces of paper fluttered through the mock streets. A siren sounded in the distance, enforcing lonely echoes throughout the hallways and floors of empty classrooms and corridors. The spine cracked. An overlooked book lay open on a desk, pages yellowing from the sneaking sun flitting through the shuttered shades. Across the vacant quadrangle, behind an ancient pile of bricks, a shoe lay tumbled on its side, surrounded by a few remaining books. It sat in a pile of rubble that stood its place like a gap in a suddenly toothless mouth. A small flame burned amongst the embers of the library. The ashes began to sizzle as the rains broke loose, but nobody was there to hear. The doors of the rooms stayed locked in the town, and behind them sat the milky eyes of the workers who analyzed the data pulled from VR, and with the help from AI, were able to market it to other countries who have not yet made the change. An Orwellian eyeball roamed listlessly over the sky, peeking into the rooms of houses and the minds of the people. The previous generations tried to stop this by warning of the book, 1984 and others, but the kids laughed that off as silly stories and returned to the blinking, harking call of their telephone screen. Soon, everyone either got worn down or died off, and nobody remembered the silly stories, and nobody remembered discussing literature, and nobody remembered autonomy or love or strangeness. So the change happened very quietly and very suddenly, and there was very little resistance because if you did resist, your new attention span would make it very hard for you to remember why. And the professors sat, very old and very tired, by their mechanical fires and thought about the beginning of the end. A brief headline flickering across premortal internet platforms and magazines. The end of the English major. That was the end of that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel there's so much richness in there, but just like, as a comment on the forum, that already is something, on this topic again, that AI could never do. AI is based off of like categorization and making things based off of categories that have already been determined. And what you've done is like cross categories in a very human way, and you've allowed room for emergence. Even the little bit of background you gave us of your process, like to get into the hard journalism, you needed to sit with fiction. Like that's something a machine can't engage with.
Absolutely. Yeah, because they can't go through the processes of the human mind. And I feel like a lot of that too is things that you wouldn't expect that create art, like moments that happen that create those moments where, like, for example, the fiction, like for me to start that, I had to like walk through the college and like think about where I was and all the things that a computer can't really generate because it's given certain boundaries.
Yeah.
But supposedly the human mind is infinite.
For sure.
In a way.
And you had not just inputs, but you had intent.
Right.
Like you had, something, maybe, I think with a lot of us in writing, we have something to say, and part of the writing process is we don't know how to maybe articulate it yet, but we want to partake on that journey of how to articulate it. And you had an intention to comment on this thing you're experiencing and seeing and feeling, and that intention to follow it opened up this pathway of, oh, what if I took dystopian fiction and then turned it into a journalistic piece, which again, that intention and that process you can't achieve with just simplified inputs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like a lot of what makes it up for me is stories. I think stories make up a lot of my life. I'm sure, like as an avid reader, like I've identified with a lot of narratives that aren't particularly mine, but that have created the person that I am. And so I see the world, I feel like, through, all these endless narratives and all these stories. And so when I was doing that piece of journalism and other pieces I write, it's more of like it's all a story. We're all stories, and that's the thing that AI can't do because it lives off of our stories.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of like a succubus. It sucks up our stories, but it can't really generate them.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. You have that line about these are just silly stories or something, even with reference to like Orwell, which is so meta and like self-referential. It was awesome. But I've encountered conversations even recently where I've met people who have questioned the function, I suppose, or utility of fiction, which is a funny way to approach fiction. But I'd be curious for both your thoughts on that, because I think there is this attitude out there that fiction is useless, or it's, you know, it's, if you're going to approach English as a subject, then it should be about grammar and, you know, producing facts or something. So I don't know, if maybe I could pose that question. What do you think of the role of fiction, or even just pursuing creative arts? Where is that going? You know?
Yeah, 100%. I think this ties in really nicely to what I was writing about. Well, a lot of the professors I talked to, they were kind of like, keep it off the record, right? Because it goes against what the university wants them to say. But one professor I remember distinctly, she mentioned that, you know, it's all monetizable now. Everything is about these capitalistic gains. And so what they're trying to do is they're monetizing like intellectual property. They're monetizing, you know, your imagination, these works of fiction. So if you can't make money off of this, then it's not worth it, basically. So I think that's where, maybe segmenting off into the humanities, but that's where I think the problem with the humanities is going. So it's no longer about learning and sharing and making these pieces of arts. It's about, what can this do for, you know, what can this make? What can we buy with this? How can we sell this? So it's like, it's selling now, I think, which if you try to market fiction, that's where you lose fiction itself, because it's never been marketizable. It's always like the most intrinsic thing to humanity, I think, is this capacity to tell stories and to share them. And so the second that we start to turn it into something that we can just put on this mass production, it loses its value, I think. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. Great stuff.
We're going deep.
I mean, Mara said something that, you know, just before that I think really speaks to this question you're asking. Paraphrasing, but I think I got it. You just said this. I have identified with narrators whose stories that aren't mine, but made me who I am.
Right.
I mean, that's what fiction can do. You know, as far as like elevate your life and give you meaning. You know, like, and I would just go to the writer's experience. You know, like the audience experience and the writer's experience. So for me, I guess the writing track was like falling in love with reading books. Watching movies, I would say first, actually. So stories, and just being like, this is the best feeling. Like, I'm moved by these stories. Like, I watched The Karate Kid last night, and I'm like getting moved by it. You know, it had been a while, but so that feeling, I like that feeling, is one of the best feelings. You know, and then starting to read more and be like, oh, this is it. You know, we're like, I mean, that conversation that a writer can have when you're really on a book that's like speaking to you, it is as close relationship that you can have, I think, you know, besides with a person, you know, but maybe even more so sometimes when it's really working. I think we've all had those experiences. Boy, that book like changed me, or like what you pointed out, like made you who you are, this narration. So like having those experiences with art, with films, with books, and then kind of liking writing anyways. I you know, I did at an early age, and being like, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to create that experience for others. And then that journey of trying to create that has been even better than the relationship of reading the book, you know, like that being on that long project of, this is something worthwhile that I'm going to stay at work at, and it's going to keep building. And, you know, I think I'm going to be able to pull off, you know, one of these books, you know, or a couple. That's what it's about to me. That's where the value lies, like that, the artist experience, the writer's experience. Like, that's how I want my life organized, like trying and keep putting an effort into this kind of long-term goal, because you know, there's so many nuances as far as the value on a daily basis, just like coming up with neat sentences, you know. So that's to that. And I do want to say before we move on from this piece, like Mara's just like sentences, like your imagery, like, you know, Leni pointed out, you kept driving it with intent, like of just this, there was a lot of imagery where you want to keep in mind that you see these mock streets and the spine cracked book and the toothless mouth, the Orwellian eyeball. Like, I mean, you're such a poet, but it's neat to see you do it with sentences, because these, you know, this is prose. And this is an intro to then there's like now a piece after this. Can you tell more? Like, could you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, so I'd definitely be willing to share it in a link or whatever later on. But so it was basically just like an investigative piece into Rhode Island schools, especially.
Okay.
And universities. So I interviewed, University of Rhode Island, which is my alma mater, and then Brown University, and then Community College of Rhode Island.
Cool.
I talked to professors and students, basically just seeing where they were in this crisis and what their thoughts were on where their major was going. Or
so a lot of quotes, a lot of perspective and viewpoints.
Yeah. Definitely an interesting read, I think, just because of the professors. A lot of it, it was nice to be able to talk to them in a way that I feel like a lot of people don't get to.
Yeah. They probably enjoyed being able to talk on this.
Oh, they were,
being asked that question.
Like I mentioned the one where she was like, keep it off the record.
Right.
Try not to, which obviously.
Thank you for letting me say this stuff.
Yeah.
Please don't print it.
Exactly. Because I think it's a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
And especially it's hard when universities are kind of these big conglomerates of like mouth-breathing corporations, and they just are sucking up money, but the professors aren't the villains. The professors are the ones that are seeing this happen, and they're saying like, hey, we're here still trying to do our thing.
Yeah. And I imagine a point, I'm an English major, but is that, it's not about making you money. It's about enhancing your life and giving you knowledge and giving you paths to like be happy and to find more knowledge and constantly be learning, right? Like these are all good things that are priceless, you know, but also no money. Yeah. So that's maybe the tension to it. Is that kind of what you discovered?
Yeah. So I kind of found, can you repeat that actually one more? Like
just like the English major is dying, but it's still around because there's still people like us who want to pursue that type of, enlightenment or knowledge or path of like, I think writers go into English, readers go into English, and there are jobs like you think of teaching, right? That's kind of like the one, or just these skills you get from your English major when you don't have an exact path yet, like, you want to be a pilot or what have you.
Right.
And, you're going to get better writing skills, better listening skills, better just like using sources. I mean, everything you get from an English major. It's a lot. Yeah. But it's not one of these easy steps. Okay, now you do this for a job and you're good.
Right. And that was kind of going back to what I was mentioning earlier about that monetizing of that like intellectualism, is that a lot of people who would find themselves possibly being English majors or history majors or anything to have with the humanities are kind of pulling back because they can't get that skill set.
Yeah.
But what they're not what they're not talking about is that skill set isn't what makes the major.
Right.
Right. It's like what you do when you do that is you're gaining a lot more than that monetary skill.
Right.
You're gaining those, those stories, those pathways that form you into an individual.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of people, that's not being talked about, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, just like the classes that you sit in, there's going to be a lot of your college, right? Like listening and surrounding yourself with this type of information and quests of learning and things you read, that's important. And so, that's a good point. These natural fits, like, you would be an English major. It's early, it's a fit for you. Maybe there's another fit, but they're like, not going to make any money. Nope. And maybe they still do pursue some creative stuff, but not through their major.
Yeah, this Community College of Rhode Island, this professor, Charles Kell, he mentioned quickly that he saw a lot of students that would be English major fits or humanitarian minded like switch because they're just like, I can't spend the money.
Oh, like even mid switch their major.
And he'd be like, but you love this,
right?
What are you doing? Stick it,
right?
And I'd say,
I
can't make money off that. Which
I guess circling back to that question, I guess, of what is the point of fiction, which is an unanswerable question, and maybe that is the point, but if you engage in fiction or world making, any sort of creative thing, you are building the capacities and the sensibilities to think about different worlds. And, if everything's oriented towards the imperative of making money or a very narrow idea of economic practice, it seems fitting to me that there is a disjuncture between those who pursue English as a major or just do creative arts in their normal life that, they're not going to fit in the job market because the enterprise is completely different. It's about thinking about different worlds. Right. And that could be political or not, but it could amount to like, okay, actually trying to do the creative work of thinking about how might we live differently, which I think is a really important role in society to
Yeah.
to have, and that would be my response. Like, what is the point of fiction? Is to always, think about how might we live differently.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a good answer to it.
Yeah.
And, art can only respond to art with art. Like it's this cyclical thing that's creative. It's a machine of creativity and not just responding to a system that's already there. It's not exchangeable in the way that something might be set to a price. It operates by a different calculations, which is, again, it's creativity. It's not monetizable, which I think is so important. And yeah, maybe the universities, because their imperative is to make money, maybe they will become an obsolete platform for the humanities. That's something we could face. But as we know, with things like this, us being in this room together, this stuff lives. It finds its places in society. People are creative fundamentally. I believe that anyway. And people will find other people to be creative with. And you can do English, you can do literature, world making, and any sort of assemblage of other people. And,
right.
Well, I think even coming here, from Rhode Island, it was instant, the connection I found with you guys, which I'm so grateful for, which I think really speaks true to what you were saying about how it's kind of a universal language. It's everywhere. So anywhere you go, no matter what, there's always going to be a group of people trying to do art, trying to do stories, which I think also ties back into that dystopian kind of fear. It's even the rise of that dystopian genre is from that backlash of, no, we're going to fight to keep these sacred things sacred. And we're going to keep, we're going to fight to keep these things going.
Makes you work even harder at writing, or like writing, we kind of come and go when it's time to write. It's like, ooh, this happened now you're feeling that pull. This is Seward Sound Words on 91.7 KIBH FM Seward, and on YouTube at our @Sacktown channel. I had a feeling it was going to go like this, with just lots of points being made and free-flowing conversation, and this is really fun. I mean, we got a lot of that one. I feel like that can be continued in a coffee hour for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
Mara Hagen and Leni Charbonneau are here on the show, and I'm really grateful. And maybe another piece of writing to share. Either of you up with that?
Yeah,
that was fun. Thank you.
That was super fun. Yeah, we can keep it. We can get it lighter.
I needed that. Here we are midsummer, and just like, I kind of stayed with it.
Okay. I guess so. Going back to, I think you were talking. We were both talking about stories and authors and how that kind of creates the person in what you are. And I wrote a poem I found the other day, a little bit ago, actually based off Jack Kerouac, who is kind of one of those people that really kind of lit a fire under my ass, if you may, to join the writing group and actually start writing myself.
Yeah.
But this is just a little poem I wrote on Kerouac, and that is the title. The waitress smirked, her apron greased. Somewhere outside we heard the willow tree, its tongue slobbering, sticking petals to the sidewalk. Hallways of the mind, where she wrote of the blue-eyed stranger, the encounter clean, pages uneaten by the careless moths of time. We'd sit back there, Cody and I, burn layers in the bottom of our cups, pickaxes chipping away at each strata, a paleontologist in blue jeans, digging for still things in old grounds. Daddy of the beats, wrote a critic, after snubbing out her hour-old cigarette. Call me old school, but I always found you more Emersonian eyeball, rolling through the decomposing leaves of the Upper East. I felt a knock against my ankle. You lay twitching, a stick caught in membrane, your pupil frantically swinging around the whiteness of your eye. I sighed and picked you up, brushed the dirt off your cornea, and tucked you under my arm, knowing you would not want to see what we found.
Nice.
Hallways of the mind. So good.
Thank you. I guess that's another kind of darker kind of take. I was looking around the world one day, just thinking about, Kerouac and versus when Kerouac was writing things, which obviously wasn't perfect, no time ever is, but versus now. And I was just thinking, what would he think, placed currently in our society? And that kind of came off of me thinking about us sitting at a coffee shop and, just kind of riffing off each other.
Yeah.
In the time.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We got Orwellian eyeball in the first piece here, Emersonian eyeball.
A lot of eyeballs.
Yeah, the previous piece there was milky eyes, and here you went close on the pupil, the whiteness of the eye. I think, that's a really cool image to focus on and gets at, we've heard now a lot of your words, Mara, and you have an intensity that I really like, like you're making use of the page, like, bringing it.
Thank you.
Which I think is good for poetry and fiction. Like you're gonna, I imagine you can really, when you're writing, you can get into a bit of another part of you, right? That's like
definitely
attacking a little bit, attacking the page, which is, that's the mark of good poetry, I think.
Speaking of eyeballs, can I share how I met Mara actually? We were both
camping
up at Moose Pass, and I was looking for a place to use the bathroom. I walked by her van, and she said, like, she sensed I was there, and she's like, I don't have my contacts in, I can't see you, but hi anyway, or something like that. I was like, oh, this person's cool.
Right.
Yeah. Come join us for a drink or something. It's super awesome, and I think that's, I don't know, it speaks to the character of a writer to make connections even without the conventions. You know, like you don't have to see something clearly to be like, oh, hey, Blob, nice to meet you. You know,
I like to think the universe was kind of like, these two people should meet.
It was awesome. Yeah.
That's cool you said that. Maybe anyone walking by, or maybe
nice
connection.
Yeah, because I went there by myself just for fun, and I was walking. I met you, but I didn't see you, so I didn't know who you were. And I was doing my thing by the train tracks, and I walked back, and I think Ryan was like, "Hey, come on over,
for sure,
have a drink." And then one thing led to another, and look at us now.
Here we are.
Yeah. Anyone listening, that's invite a stranger over.
Be open to the world, and again, you can. I think you also said a brilliant thing on one of our writers groups the other week. Like, it's amazing. Anyone can just write. Like, you don't need all the infrastructure of like universities, like you mentioned, are great. There's some stimulating. We all have histories there, but they're not necessary for this type of thing as well either. Like, you can make connections anywhere with other people, or literarily, the world is waiting for that. And
absolutely. And I think too, like, just the method of practice will make you just a better writer, just surrounding yourselves. I think the open mics are so important for that too, because it does keep that kind of schedule that maybe the academic world does help foster in the writing process.
Sure, the essays do.
And just keeping to it. But if you can find something outside of that, which you can also adhere to that same schedule, is very helpful.
For sure. Yeah, got to get something ready.
Yeah.
Open mic in 2 days. Might have something. And then I missed the last one. I was close. Started getting it going. I could feel that deadline working. But the open mic's been huge, and it's really been the driving force of keeping our writing scene going in the summer, with summer being so different. And I'm very grateful for it. And I've, been written some fun pieces, and just that practice with the mic, like reading my work took a long time to get used to. I was not into it at all. But you kind of get over the hump. You do one. It's like, oh, not so bad. Okay. Oh, somebody gave me a compliment. You put it out there. Your piece becomes something new when you read it aloud, right? Don't you look at your pieces differently once you've shared it?
For sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, certainly others do, because they've now heard it, But
I think I mentioned last coffee hour how the open mics too kind of help me even write poetry. Because I'm like, how would this sound aloud? How is this going to sound to other ears? Versus, I think a lot of the times it's very internal, the writing process. And so it's kind of nice to try to imagine that externalized.
Yeah, when you go, there's stuff you choose to read, better to read on the page versus this one's going to really work well aloud. There's voices. I found dialogue was something I try to bring in, for sure. Yeah, and even as you write it, like this one I'm going to read aloud, and it's fun. That show, it's a part of writing, which my mentor had told me, and I was like, no, I read books, but I've really appreciated that. It's a whole nother aspect to it, and it's really a way to, it's hard to have someone read a long piece you wrote, but if they show up at a reading and you read, a 5-minute thing, it's like they get a Leni or Mara experience just by being there, and it's rich, and it doesn't take much time. So
I mean, I think we think of literature as being like one medium, but within itself there's so many different forms it could take. There's oral literature, and then when you're just playing with text on a page, and that's how others will encounter it, you can really play with what text can do on a page. It's it opens itself to so many different combinations again. Playfulness.
Yeah, great point. I'll just throw, oral literature, stories, like another reason, going back to your question, well, why write fiction? What's the point? Right? Kind of something like that. Or what's the future? I mean, it's so tied to the past. I think as we go forward with all these new technologies and AI and just a fast changing world and smartphones, like to be able to connect with the past and what people have always done as a rich, form, or just what's been passed on is important to keep that going. And storytelling in so many forms has always been there. It's always been a part of our world cultures.
Yeah.
So for us to be a part of that and just know that that's something we can trust as working, and by working I mean good for humanity, right? Not making money, but just like being good and like inspiring people. And so that's a reason to keep going with it, and to us stay with it. 91.7 KIBH FM Seward. Seward Sound Words. Mara Hagen, Leni Charbonneau.
You want to share something?
I could, yeah. I could share an introduction to a piece.
Yeah.
Like I said, the open mic's been great for me to play around with like shorter form pieces. But my background has been writing longer form. And my degree, my graduate degree is in environmental history, which doesn't mean anything to a lot of people, and it literally could mean anything. It's such an open field, and undisciplined, if you want to call it that. I believe it is about making connections as well, and environmental history is fun because it's about how we think about human connections to the environment. It can be anthropological, consider how different rationalities have made sense of those relations, how our mediascapes and culture make sense of our relations to the environment, anything between there. But all to say, most of my pieces in that world have been longer form. And so, I could share an introduction to something I wrote. This was for a magazine based in Sweden. It was a aesthetics and philosophy magazine, but they're also quite engaged with like the environmental humanities and things in that area. And I guess just for some context, I'll just read I'll read a bit of the introduction to this, and then just trail off and possibly maybe somewhat to the conclusion, potentially. But for some context, I wrote my master's thesis on yogurt. I came to yogurt in a very circuitous sort of way. I was really interested in how humans have made sense of these things we now call like microbial ecologies, how over time these things that we've literally grown up with in the evolutionary record that are a part of human culture in all the different ways. We are cultured beings in that sense. We are made of microbes. How we've made sense of that and made things with it, things like yogurt or cheese or any number of cultural items. And this piece actually, this is a few years old now, but I was just starting to play around with that idea when I wrote it, and I was trying to connect poetry and microbial ecologies and histories of yogurt together. So I'll just read a few paragraphs of it. There will probably be plenty of threads left untied because I don't want to bore your readers with several pages of this. But I start off this piece with a poem from Sayat Nova, who was a 17th century Armenian poet who's contributed to so many poems and songs that are still a huge part of the general Caucasian culture over in Georgia, Armenia, that part of the world. And this is about yogurt.
Nice.
Okay. I am as heavy as cotton, as light as gold. I am as white as ink, as black as yogurt. I am as reasonable as a madman, as excited as someone meek. Since I have no brain, they call me knowing. That was by Sayat Nova.
That's cool.
I like it.
Whether poet or craftsman, philosopher or comic, laborer or revolutionary, paradox has been the lingua franca of found knowledge. Bringing together opposing elements makes disorientation inherent to the form. For this reason, empty paradoxes, employed to obfuscate and confuse, have equally been the lingua franca of that other universal class, hucksters and hacks, swindlers and salesmen. The crucial difference concerning sincerity here lies in the intent behind the disorientating effect. When evoked to transmit insights and experience, the disorientation of paradox can generate an interpretive landscape. It can be an invitation to search for meaning in unlikely places amongst unlikely relations. Paradox of this nature beckons experience, and the geocache meanings which cannot be isolated, sold, nor plainly consumed. Paradox, instead, invites us to make sense outside of common sensibilities. Paradoxically, these kinds of paradoxes are quite common. Socrates made the famous admission that he knows nothing. Abraham Maslow echoed the adage that the sacred must be found in the ordinary. Philip K. Dick identified the trash stratum of life as the place where the divine is most manifest. Nothing is sacred. That lofty pedestrian phrase means that everything truly is such. And then there is yogurt. Rarely has such a common, even profane substance been so consistently mired with allegories of the sacred. A concise history of yogurt presents this thick white sludge as a happy afterthought of spoiled milk. Fermented over time, yogurt has produced an utterly banal stench as a global market commodity. Yet past and present, yogurt has been attributed near mythological status and has been a constant fixture in various cults of vitality. Mentions of yogurt have been identified in some of the earliest found scripts in Eurasia and North Africa. In antiquity, the magical transformation of aged milk into an airy delicacy was so highly celebrated that historians have suggested that the famed biblical Promised Land would be more aptly named the land of fermented milk and honey. This reverence stems from yogurt long being associated with longevity, an association naturally extended from its production process. The proof is in the Seward pudding. Allowing raw milk to ferment in warm environments has historically been one of the most reliable ways to store and extend the shelf life of this precious fluid. The now universally recognized name yogurt originated from the Turkic yogurmak, meaning that which thickens or curdles. As these populations traveled across the Eurasian steppe lands, they transported milk in bags made from goat hide. Herein, microbial cultures synthesized compounds in the milk, resulting in a curdling effect and increased preservation for long journeys and conquest. Yogurt cultures, then, are intimately entangled with human culture. I go on, but I think I'll stop there. We can maybe give a link to a longer piece.
I think people will want to stay on the path here with you guys. That was really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
I liked how you took something as like banal as like yogurt.
Yeah.
And really kind of dive deep into it.
Yeah, it's been a fun project. It turned into like a passion project for like a few years now.
Yeah.
That came through. A lot of work. I mean, in hearing about your academic writing, I'll call it, I think you've used that word a little bit, kind of keeping it simple. But there is definite fun and creative writing going on here, like on the sentence level. I feel like you're having, yes, you're getting facts in there and there's stuff you want to work in, but you're doing things that make you feel like an artist, right? Like pulling off some of these word plays or just like these turns, and then there is yogurt. Like that's like a nice transition.
I like the Seward pudding.
Yeah,
kind of
like where we can chuckle, and have, an experience that is educational, and you're learning this new thing, and it starts at the root. Like, to your point, you don't need, you just have to write something like that. Like just an idea. Like this is all this cool idea. Like I'm gonna write my master's on yogurt and make connections, like the culture connection, and then like that was a cool idea. So that's what you need, right? And then you need to decide to write after having an idea that's like you recognize like this is worth writing about. This is a cool idea. Sit with it for a while, then decide to start writing, then research, and then you build it. And who knows where you could go from it. And we all have ideas. Here on the show, I'm all about like new writers and just write. Anyone and just notice your idea, and I think I could have fun with this. This is worth working out on the page and kind of finding angles on. And then here we go, and you write your master's on it, get published in an international magazine, and I mean, yogurt people are probably just stoked about that.
Oh, it's been so fun and quite clarifying, and then it's opened a lot of other doors where I'm so confused but really healing and like restorative as well. Because it sort of came from like my previous work and like more like I've had some professional experience working in like transnational politics, but specifically between like issues of indigenous sovereignty. I was working between the Sami areas of Scandinavia and Sami are the indigenous people of Northern Europe, and Ainu territories of Japan. Again, Ainu being the indigenous people of Northern Japan. And really, really meaningful work, such amazing connections through that. But yeah, heavy at times, as it is. And one thing I was, came across so much and wanted some clarification and maybe complication on was this term of decolonizing. What does it mean to decolonize ourselves, like, sincerely? And I was getting a bit frustrated with how buzzwordy that word had gotten, because it means a lot to a lot of people, and then it's been sort of abused, especially in the academic sector. And I had this general provocation. It's like, okay, to think about decolonization, what that could mean sincerely, not that there is one answer. I thought it could be useful to just look for another metaphor. And that turned me on to microbes. I'm like, okay, what does colonization look for microbes? And what could that teach us about ourselves and our human histories? Still don't have a clean answer there, but it did open this whole other path of like how we think about movement and the tensions between change and newness and the destruction of ecologies and the creation of new ecologies. It's just really complicated a lot of things for myself, and generated conversations and thoughts that have informed other aspects of my life, like that more political dimension. So been really important. And it started out, it's like, okay, take something heavier, make it light. And then it turned into like a few years project about yogurt. So that's
that seems worthwhile, though, hearing you talk about it and just like, what you read, like, that's worth spending time on. And the metaphor angle, I think that can be very useful, where it's like, you're talking about decolonization, like that's been, approached several ways, and maybe people are used to it, or it has this buzzword, this stigma to it. Well, let me go talk about yogurt, and then how you argue about it. Like, is yogurt decolonization? Like, no. But if you argue like the good old fashioned like essay, like topic, sentence, supporting argument, and the way you make connections, then we could be long on this ride with you and keep going, because it's interesting. And because yogurt is kind of neat. Like, a lot of us eat yogurt, and, to learn more about this kind of food, like this very interesting food that changes, it's like that idea of like that you can travel with it. Like, that was such a big moment where like we could now carry milk for a long time in this form. That changed the game, I imagine.
Yeah. And wild things about it, like it was not a staple part of, the sort of North American, Western European diet until that, recently, like the 20th century. Right. And now it's essentially colonized a good portion of our supermarkets. Like, how did that happen? What were what was the intrigue behind yogurt? What made it this sort of, now very normal food, but, also a fad item? And it's still sort of a fad item in a sense. People attribute all these, I mentioned there's like, over time it's had a different cults of vitality associated to it, and that's true today as well. It's used for, it's a health food, quote unquote, or, so again, just making connections to the past and sitting with letting things be complex and complicated as they are. There's continuity and change always, all the time, and it's not so linear, it's not so cut and dry. And so I think the hidden intention, I guess, as it emerged in that process, was to productively complicate things that are important, like decolonization. There's no one solution, because if you presume one solution, that means there's maybe one person who has the answer, and that honestly seems like a sort of colonialist maneuver. But if we complicate things and leave things open to conversation, allowing multiple things to be true at once, and giving ourselves space to talk through things, I feel like that's worthwhile. And like turning to the banal things of life, I think is super worthwhile. Like a stinky soured milk.
Yeah. I think it's super interesting, going back to a point you mentioned a little bit ago about how you were looking at decolonization and how to decolonize, and you're like, all right, let's turn to the microbes of yogurt, which I think is such an interesting lens to approach things, like following through something as unorganic, I guess, is colonization, or not or something as, I guess you could say unorganic as colonization, and looking at how the natural processes, how do they do that? How does that happen in yogurt? And I think that's such a bridge to cross. I don't know if you could say more on that, if I'm just...
I mean, I don't think there's like a one-to-one translation between like human concerns and ethics and the language that we use to describe like natural phenomenon. And I definitely don't want to like neutralize histories of human colonization with like, oh, it happens in nature, therefore definitely don't want to do that. But the goal instead was to learn, okay, we also use this term in this context, and we see these processes happening with the same term. How might that again complicate our understandings of what's happened, so that we can maybe productively think about what something like decolonization would look like, as opposed to merely a reactionary view of history where it's just like, oh, we go back to one point in time, because we can never do that, or any other sort of oversimplified option. So yeah, I think it was looking for metaphors and not necessarily equalizing them, but just seeing what provocations emerge. I guess similarly to what we were talking about earlier, this sort of like making room for the process of discovery, as opposed to like an AI where it could be like, put in 2 inputs and then you get sort of an expected output. But more of like, okay, I have 2 inputs. We have human histories of colonization, and then like, say bacterial colonization.
Right.
Say those are my inputs. But what I'm really interested is in the space in between,
right,
where you have relation and tension and discontinuity and, all sorts of contradictions and like all of that complicated matter. The space between, I think, is what's interesting. Right. Which again, like I think AI, it can have 2 inputs, but it can't really have space in between.
Right. So you miss out on that. All those, like the best parts you got of this project are those spaces in between. And as we learn something new, like that makes your day or more. And like you find this piece that you've put in the work, the search. Like I don't want to miss out on making my day like so much with writing.
Right.
But I love this idea, Leni, of like complicating is the goal. Like that's a paradox, right? I think often we think that, it's like, all right, let's get it down to its essence. How can we say this where everyone can understand? Like, no, like that's not how it works. Like the goal is to point out that there's layers and to add, like it's not this as simple as that, like drive this to complicate. I like that. That's a good thing to go for.
For sure. And I don't want to overly plug this piece, but going into the bacterial world really enriched and like drove home that point, because part of the reason why yogurt became such a global commodity is there were some scientists around the turn of the century who thought they had discovered a fountain of youth with one bacteria, and they had this idea that they could isolate one bacteria that was located in yogurt and then sort of use yogurt as a vehicle to feed that to people, and then people would live forever or something. It was this crazy. This was in like high scientific institutions. And that's sort of the vehicle through which like yogurt became known to a larger public.
Sure.
But then the more we've learned about bacterial ecologies, the more we've learned that you can't have essences, you can't have things that are isolated on their own. Bacteria, which are so much more resilient in nature than we could ever imagine to be, they get that resiliency and their capacities for adaptation from cooperation, from actually building structures with other species. And when they are put in isolation, they actually can't really survive. And so really, I think yogurt was also very surprisingly enlightening about this idea of essences and isolation. It's dependent on bringing things together. It's like interspecies, like cooperation. And so, yeah.
That's cool. I mean, that's kind of what we've been talking about with artists and, us writers, artists finding writers always. And, it can be isolating, but when you come together, you can really be stronger and resilient.
Yeah.
I think I'm thinking of AI stuff, which we spend a lot of time with, where you can kind of argue both ways, right? As far as what you're bringing up there. Bacteria. Very cool.
I think I want to briefly touch on the metaphor part.
Yeah.
I think that's super interesting. A lot of something that I think about is metaphor and how we describe, as a literary person, how we describe our lives through metaphor, especially like in poetics, like Wordsworth or Shelley or someone going through poetics, and the way that life is described, it's through this association with something else that is, as or like. But what is that at its essence? So also philosophically digging into the essence of that, which sounds like you're trying to do through the metaphor of yogurt. I don't know, I find that kind of play very interesting and intrinsic to kind of being a writer, is how to work around metaphors and how to use them to describe what's going on, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
I zone in on metaphors in my teaching, and like, we got the metaphor for the whole piece, right?
Mhm.
Like where Lenny's going here with the cultures. And then, in your writing, like we've heard several just metaphors right on the page, right? These poetic moments that I think those really grab people. And like, when you could put down a new original metaphor and have someone be, oh, I never thought about it like that. Like, that's great. Like that stays with them. And I always, when I read a new author, like I'm looking for metaphors, and I know like when the first one hits, how often they're coming in. And that's a mark for me. That's like, I like this writer,
Yeah, definitely.
Even if some aren't landing like big, just that they're conscious of metaphors are valuable, and those are nice moments for the reader. And I like writing them and thinking of them. And I tell my students, like, you don't need to be in the act of writing, like, all right, I need a metaphor here. Metaphor. It's like when you're out walking around and you just see this good connection, that's, you just wrote it. Like you saw it, you identified it, keep it, and work that in. You get them stored up.
Right.
You have a lot of metaphors in your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have something to connect to yogurt here? Like a written piece, or do you...
About yogurt?
Or just... I think we could go in a new direction.
Okay.
That was awesome. We're on YouTube on the @Sacktown channel. This is Seward Soundwords. Please subscribe. Please check out the show. We're also on the radio if you're hearing this on 91.7 KIBH FM Seward. Thank you for listening to this midsummer Seward Soundwords. Really fun being here.
Yeah. I guess so. Maybe we'll bounce off the metaphor thing, and I could share a piece you two have already heard, but I worked on a little bit more.
Nice.
Aging Gracefully off of the last writer's open mic thing. And I think that there's some metaphors that I'm working on here that I'd like to share.
Sweet.
Cool. Okay, so it's called Aging Gracefully. The river's breath is cold, reminding me of all its holes which time has crafted into caverns. As fawns, we cross our spindly legs into applesauce, dipping soft boiled eggs in chocolate candy coating to hide in the secret bushes of our youth, where all things mysterious and dark happen. Pulling petals off green grass daisies. Pick me another, let me try again, believing love lays at the end of a bald flower head. A young woman, I will travel down country roads of electric storm. My mother will be a small dot in the corn ditch, jangled jeweled arms, bouncing sun off a sea of stalks. Here, here, this is where you hide when sirens fill the sky. Her voice, I think later, I mistook for wind. If I heard, I would have buried myself in the moist ground, peek silver-eyed from alpine roots and pray that I see sunshine. Watch the years pass through life like cruise ships, distant and glittering dinner parties across an endless bay.
Nice.
No yogurt in that one.
Applesauce, though.
Applesauce,
Right.
yeah, see?
Yeah.
So we're playing off that.
Yeah, Cruise ships, is that like, written in Seward, like kind of just having that around kind of thing?
I think the last stanza with the sunshine and the cruise ships, you're from the mountains, you're praying for the sun, as we all know that feeling so well. Not this past week, but...
Our prayers were answered.
Yeah, exactly. You're welcome, guys. And the cruise ships, I think, I work on the docks and I look across the bay a lot.
Right.
And I see these cruise ships and sometimes I feel that like, oh, I kind of want to be on that. It looks so inviting and warm and, anything to take me away.
Yeah.
You ever have that, looking at airplanes, looking at cruise ships, that kind of longing to just go somewhere, be somewhere else. And I think maybe transferring that into just watching the years pass through life, like cruise ships, looking back on life in nostalgia, kind of, oh, take me back there, put me there, bring me to the future, bring me to the past, trying to put yourself in the present sometimes is difficult.
Yeah, so there's that metaphor umbrella and kind of like the whole life, right? Like I always have this feeling that I'm working, cutting fish or out on the docks, and I'm looking at a cruise ship lit up, sailing off with people are eating lobster on it, or doing whatever, gambling, fun stuff. You're using that for the whole piece. I mean, this metaphor, like I talk about an original metaphor. My mother is a dot in the corn ditch, like that's an original, like Mara, like you never thought of a mother figure as a what is even a dot? Like it's beautiful. So there's like several original things going on there. So like these ideas, and I really like this line too, because you've been talking a lot about paradox, which I think is so interesting in writing, where you kind of flip things and, someone's surprised, like, ooh, I never thought about it like that. Like, these are moments where it's like, oh yeah, like I'm going to keep reading. Because that's the goal. Like, okay, she's awesome. That line convinces me I should keep reading. You just won the reader with that.
Right.
Our youth, where all things mysterious and dark happen. Think of like youth as innocence, and, but as we kind of, open the lid a little more and spend some time with that, like, yeah, when we don't know anything, and these, just I think there's a lot of truth to that. And it's another one of these kind of attack mode Mara, lines.
Yeah,
that is great, that I think people would really relate to and be like, she's telling it like it is. She's sharing. And
hidden corners in the hallways of the mind.
Yeah.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just again, the imagery, right? You have like the hard boiled eggs and the chocolate candy, and like there's some like youthful kind of fun to that. Like, yeah, this is nice stuff. Like really, really, I like to think of like good words, good poetry, like you're like engraving it in stone, like where you're like chipping with and there's definitely even like at the farmer's market, I try to listen closely, and I do, like some of the stuff I remember, but you said you'd work on it. It seemed like it got a little longer, or we're a little new version here.
Yeah, so it has a little bit more. Like, one I really worked on was the mother and the corn ditch. That one took me, as the writing process. It was one I had to come back to constantly, because I was like, how do I express this? Because I don't know, I guess for a little backstory, it came out of my mom. She's from Minnesota, and we're driving through when I was a kid, and she'd be like, oh, when the tornado sirens happen, you have to get in the corn ditch and pull your car off, and we'd always do that. And so that came somewhere out of my mind. And
awesome.
The jangled jeweled arms bouncing sun off the sea of stalks. I was trying to, undulate the waves and her bracelets and the sea, but it's not the sea, it's the stalks, but the sun is, when the sun hits the water.
Yeah. Jangles.
Yes.
Yeah. Love that image. I've written, tried to be poetic about it many, many times.
Right. Yeah. But I think that's, another testament to the writing process is just constantly going back and playing with those metaphors.
For sure.
Yeah.
How to make something sound and look the way you want it to.
Yeah, it just fits. And if there's a tornado, that's where the dot comes in, like against this, natural disaster overhead, like your mom's just a dot.
Yeah.
And like, this stuff, like, I don't know that backstory from the poem, right? But I zone in on this awesome metaphor. And then often there is something where that line, like lands with us readers, like, oh, that is really cool. But it means so much to you, like how you put that together. There's so much backstory in this one metaphor. That's when it works. Like sometimes I'll write something, and I imagine writing that for you, where it's just like you're really moved by that line because you did it. It's like you pulled in all these things from your history, and it means so much to you. And now it's in a line that can be shared with readers, and they can get something different from it, or it's interpretive and artistic.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever have these kids books? They were like I Spy, the game I Spy, but they were like in book form.
Okay.
Where you'd have like essentially what was this big picture book. There's no text. It was just all these pictures of like a surface with all these items on it. It's like very cluttered pages.
Yeah.
Right.
And the point of them was like you'd sit with someone and you'd play I Spy.
Right.
And this page where there's just like all these items about.
Yeah.
And it was so cool. I remember loving these books. Do you remember?
Yeah. It was like Where's Waldo kind of thing.
Yeah,
that kind
exactly.
of layout.
Yeah, that kind of layout, but it wasn't like there wasn't a Waldo. It was like you'd cue into one object and then you'd sit with someone and like they'd ask you questions about what you've cued into. But so cool because essentially all it is, it's really simple. It's just all these little objects put together on a page, and it's like little worlds that are created. It's just like you can make all sorts of maybe like subtle explanations of like why this object's next to this one. Maybe they all came from the same drawer in a kitchen or something. Like there'd be enough relation there to be like, okay, these items aren't totally out of place together, but they're still random.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love that. It seems like we're always doing that. Our daily lives are full of just like things and phenomena that you can like make all these different connections with, and stories that if you like choose to weave them together. And I feel like that like your poetry does like make these little worlds. You're bringing all these items together, like jangled jeweled arms and a boiled egg and applesauce, and what's so cool is like you've made this world and it's coming from a world that you've experienced, but I'm definitely gonna have jangled jeweled arms stick with me, and the next time maybe I see like a glint of silver on a sunny day, I might think of that, and that will transfer to like a new world so that I'll be in. And that's the cool thing about art is it just like keeps going and reconfiguring itself, and connections aren't limited to the piece that they're in. They like go out into the world and all the micro worlds and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Poetry's so cool for that.
Yeah. I think too, like going back to the I-Spy book, I think it's so interesting how, you focus on one thing and that's like particular to you.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for example, like the Jangled Jewel Arms or something is particular, but someone else may focus on something else that's particular to them, and yet it still brings them into a whole nother world. Like there's so many different universes that can be created off of one thing, one idea, one sentence, or one metaphor.
For sure.
The infinite richness of details, small details. I think that's a mark of good writing, when you really spend time on something small and break it down. Like yogurt, which is big.
Yeah.
Really,
Huge.
You're in a good zone when you're doing something like that. This is Seward Sound Words, Midsummer. So I do, as we talk about open mic, so Leni opened with her piece that she shared about artificial intelligence, and then Mara just read her piece for our most recent open mic last few days ago, which was the theme was aging gracefully, which a visiting writer from Jamaica, Patricia Reed Waugh, just chose that really on the spot. She's written a couple books about retirement. They're actually at the Seward Public Library, so do check those out. She had a lot of great things to say in the short amount of time I got to spend with her at Summit Sips Trainwreck Coffee House. Aging gracefully, which was a good theme as well. Obviously Mara's got a gem poem here, and I got in the space of thinking about that more, and I definitely have things to say about it. I think I will follow up on that. But I think as we get toward the end of maybe our session here, I mean, we could do this all day, and we'll pick up back, at the next coffee hour. But I think it would be cool if together we came up with the next theme.
Okay.
Put that on the air.
I would love that.
And if either of you want to share something else that could give the others time to think about the thing, do you have maybe one more, Mara, or do you want to? Snow.
Yeah, I could do one more.
Cool.
Okay, let me.
I don't know. The theme could be anything. Could be kind of combined, made connections in what we talked about today, or just whatever. I have one in mind, but probably shouldn't be it.
I could do the one I read last time or 2 times ago, or I could do another one.
Mara Hagen here and Leni Charbonneau on Seward Sound Words. Really big, bringing a lot of energy to the writing scene here in Seward. Farmers Market open mic is every farmers market, so we will be on a every Saturday in August schedule. The market starts at 10. The turnips are gone by 10:15, and open mic we've been starting around 11, and it's been really fun. And the more the merrier.
Definitely catch that turnip window.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I can close off on this one, I guess, which I read, I think, my second open mic.
Yeah.
So just recycling those, but it's been so much fun to revisit them and
Sweet.
Get it out there. So this is called, it first was titled On Loving the Right Man, and then it was On Loving the Wrong Man, and then I realized there's no right or wrong, so it's just On Loving the Man. Brown-eyed mirrors to the soul. I am wary, I am wrong. I place lonely hands against walls of freedom from watery glass reflections. I argue back and forth with fate. A gentle lapping, our thirsty tongues against the white insect belly of smooth runaway moonlight. The purple couch, blue shoes near the door, pieces of hair I will pick later from your shirts. Planes don't exist to fly away anymore. You'll be like you once were, calloused hands in the dark heart of a young woman, delicately placing blossoms, wet dew, cut grass, and wood. She stops answering my calls. My sternum beats in hollow, roomy throb, the beat of days, years, centuries, dust. Listen closely. You can hear it catching in the blood.
Nice.
It's a light one to.
I never know what's coming. It's cool. There's a lot of surprise to your work. Where you just kind of, you can't Sometimes you'll say a word that's coming next, like for a sentence or something that never happens with you. It's always catching me off guard. Listen closely. So we're looking for sound there, and then you go in the blood. To finish it, and that's a strong finish.
I think I was going, when something catches and it makes a kind of, and I was imagining arteries and something catching on a lifted ledge.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like that list of wet dew, cut grass on wood. You know, there's some structure there as far as like a series. I'll never forget when I was in college, this is 20 years ago, like I think the first reading I went to I was like an undergrad, maybe just starting on the writing certificate path, and the graduates were reading. And this guy went up and just read this story about, I think it was a solo character story, and he just had this line, you know, the smell of cut grass. He just like threw in there. And like I like say that still today, and like think of this, like his whole story was awesome, and I was like, oh man, I got work to do. But that just stuck with me. Like we talk about, you know, Jewel Jangled Arms, how stuff stays with you. And every time I think of it, I just remember that reading and that impression he had on me. And you know, I love the smell of cut grass. Here it is in your poem.
I think it's such like a not harsh, a strong smell.
Yeah.
That it just resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah. It can mean so much, you know, like youth and my favorite chore.
Cutting the grass.
But just that idea of how it stays with you. And I just got a lawnmower, which I'm very happy about.
Oh, nice. No more scything.
Right. No. The weed whacking,
Welcome to
I
this
guess.
century.
Yeah. It's the little things.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so we need a theme for the next open mic. This has been amazing. Thank you guys so much really fun.
Yeah,
and for listeners here on 91.7 KIBH FM Seward or watching on YouTube on our @Sacktown channel, always looking for guests. If you want to come on the air, get in touch with me. My email is seanolman@gmail.com. And certainly, you know, guests for the open mic, I encourage you to come by the farmers market. It's always such a boost of energy, just all smiles around, good feelings, really a winter kind of vibe for me, a real community feel. Of course, we have tourists passing through too, because we're set up right there at the Ranting Raven, but a lot of people I see regularly in the winter. It keeps me in touch with them, keeps me having these winter conversations and just checking in and lifting each other up. And you could always, you know, listen to some open mic because we're going to be performing and you know, Leni might, you know, how do you like doing the MC thing? It seems like you're really having fun with that.
I'm having fun.
We encourage performers, but we don't pressure, I think.
Yeah, there's it depends who I see in the crowd. There's some softcore bullying for sure to get people
I think you bullied me, to be honest.
Yeah. And you know, look where it's led.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Very quickly. No,
it's been great. I'm having a blast with it. Definitely getting me out of my shell as well. But I should say open mic is not just for, you know, strictly literary written works. Welcome musicians. If anyone wants to improv, anything of that nature, just to share with the community. Yeah. It is open mic. So
or you know, come and check it out with no intention of all performing, but just to watch the show.
Yeah.
Because that's fun. So.
And participants who do open mic, I should mention, do get a free buttered tortilla from Huerto's Tortilleria.
Yeah. AK Bird trading card typically going to performers as long as they haven't run out. But yeah, it's we throw prizes at you for sure.
Perks,
yeah. And just to get it out there, you know, get it done.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
All right, so let's get this theme knocked out.
Yeah,
we definitely need like a call-in feature.
I know, that's what I was thinking.
Call it, phone a friend.
We've talked about that. That would be great. They're lighting up. Hold on.
Yeah. Got too many callers.
That stay tuned for that. There is capability for that, I've been told. I would love to do that. But for now, it's just us. And we need a theme. So, I mean, I at the beginning, I wrote down Dog Days of Summer, which has been a term that I've, like, you know, always kind of liked, never really known the exact meaning. I looked it up once. I'm feeling that way a little bit, even though I can't necessarily define it. Like, we've had some summer, now it's sunny. Yeah. So that's something I'll throw out there.
There's I know down at the docks I hear a lot of Angry August.
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
Seasonal.
Oh, maybe I'd have to, you know, vet open mic submissions for that one. Maybe we get some like
no screaming.
Maybe we paradox that, you know, like not Angry August. What's the opposite of angry? You know, or like, because I do try to pace myself, and I have kind of hit a little something here mid-season, and I'm like working that out. But I try to like have energy for August and September, because those are just great times here. And there is this sense of like savoring the summer before it goes, you know, like it's still summer. Like it's not like, let's just recognize, like that's when I hike more.
Yeah.
So maybe something of like savoring August or Awesome August.
Yeah.
Awesome August, like reminding yourself like what there is to love about summer.
Yeah, and we will be in August for this one, right?
Yeah.
This will be Saturday, August 5th, I think.
For sure. Next market, Saturday, August 5th.
Mark your calendars.
That's a good call.
I'm
yeah.
really into the savoring summer.
Savoring summer sounds.
Yeah, we are a farmer's market.
Yeah.
That's
food.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's not limited to merely taste buds alone.
I think that gives me a very like sensual kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Like savoring summer. So all the flowers are blooming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we did have the sun.
So different from just tasting it. It's actually letting things linger and
Okay, should we go savoring summer? And then, the underwriting can be, awesome August, or, if you want a little more like the opposite of angry
summer.
August.
For sure.
Butter grilled
Cool.
tortillas.
Good work, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Pretty organic.
I like it.
Man, what are the chances for like yogurt at the market? Wouldn't that be something?
That would be something. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a dairy in Seward, Dairy Hill,
Dairy
like
Hill,
above
exactly.
the lagoon. Like
Yeah.
that's a good history thing.
Yeah, I will say, yogurt is incredibly easy to make. I don't know, maybe in the future we could do a little fermentation workshop or something.
Cool.
It'd be really fun.
Yeah,
That'd be super fun.
that sounds very Seward, Seward type thing.
Yeah.
And I did want to ask with the docs, have you written poems that like really like a doc poem, with that work? Like I like, poems about work and stuff and just hearing about that. Like when we first moved here, Sadie and I worked at a cannery for 5 days and I wanted to just be a half day. I was done.
Right.
It was really hard. But we stayed and I got some good material that I worked into a cannery kind of here for the Seward novel, even some poems, just because of the characters and it was like some really rich living going on. It was so new for me. And, fish out of water, to use a cliche metaphor that,
Definitely.
But I like that.
Right.
I knew as I was there, I was like, all right, this will be good writing. I could go another day.
That's kind of how I'm living my summer out. I'm like, okay, this is all something to add to the brain, add to the experience.
But have you written poems that it's doc work,
I haven't honestly written any. I've written a lot of longer prose forms.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You don't need to share it. I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Not too much. I feel like it's always interwoven within some of my imagery.
Yeah, sure.
But it's nothing right now. I mean, it's peak season, so there's a lot of fish.
Yeah.
There's a lot of blood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of that kind of hostility and gore has kind of came into some of my writing, which is a little weird.
Yeah.
No, that's always good.
I did write one the other day, and I was kind of on the docks, but it was kind of wild, and I was like, ooh, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
Because it's just sometimes there's just a lot of death around you.
Right.
When you're dealing with that amount of fish.
Yeah.
And it's triggering a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was talking with a friend yesterday about how Alaska operates with these very I think unique paces where now we're getting so many fish upriver. People are going dip netting, and it's this bonanza is what it sounds like. I haven't been myself, and I did have I'm one of these insufferable vegetarians. I did have one of these reactions. Someone was telling me about dip netting. I was like, whoa, it sounds brutal. Just catching fish. Smashing their heads, catching fish,
Yeah.
But then I was like, well, I mean, that's actually really fitting to the pace of this landscape. It's all happening right now, and it's cool to see people also match that in their practices.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think there's I don't know, because I also, my friend took me snagging, and I wrote a piece on it too, because I'm also an insufferable vegetarian.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is definitely not for me, but also taking yourself back, it's respecting that this has been done, for so many years, and who might have come in and make these snap judgments. But I think also there's some, I don't know, there's an amount of greed sometimes that I think I don't personally agree with. But I think that's also just the amount of fish and the amount of it just is sport. Because it's sport catch, so it becomes this kind of game, and it almost transfers into this kind of grab for power yet again of resources. And
for sure.
Some people I really jive with that are super stoked, and some people, are not stoked on their 200 pounds of halibut.
Yeah.
But that's everywhere you go.
For sure.
There's always going to be that.
Yeah. You have bears, their form of savoring summer is just gorging themselves on berries for a couple months, and then they go to sleep.
Yeah. Kind of a dream.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome
So
stuff. I think we covered a lot of good subjects. I want to just thank everyone for tuning in here on 91.7 KIBH FM Seward, and for watching on our YouTube channel at Sacktown, where our other Seward Sound Words episodes are located. Under the live tab, there is where you can find it. And new one added to the archive today here with Mara Hagen and Leni Charbonneau. We're feeling good. Yeah. Anything else you guys want to say?
Great.
I think I said it all.
All right. Well, we got the next Seward Farmers Market on August 5th. We're going to be doing an open mic at 11 a.m. And the theme is Savoring Summer. So come on down.
Hope to see you there.
Thank
See
you
you
guys.
at the market,
I
yeah.
was going to say once
Thank
more,
you,
really
Sean.
appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Sean. Yeah.
Good coordination
Thank
and really fun listening to you and getting to spend more time with your words.
Yeah.
I'm going to go over this way. I got it. End stream. Thank you all.
Thanks.